Hello, welcome to Commoner and our chats with Lefties. We're here with Mr NoBuddies, joining us from Maryland, isn't it?
Yes.
We had an interesting chat on his Twitch stream the other night. It was 3:00 in the morning for us by the time we ended, because of the time distance. And now he's kindly joining us here. And we're just going to have a friendly chat about economics and left-wing politics. It's not a fierce debate. There's going to be no owning of each other. Sorry for anyone that likes that. We're just going to probably just be friendly chatting about everything. So cool. So why don't we start? We just before we started recording, you were chatting about this is probably something you can say a bit more about because you've seen the status, the game in UBI.
Yeah, and how you were having a conversation with the video character about universal basic income.
Yes. So a lot of my personal economic philosophies comes from the idea of that we should be aiming towards giving everybody a minimum viable value within sort of the marketplace. So whereas opposed to most of the left, they think of just abolishing commerce and capitalism, or that's how the rhetoric tends to go. I think instead what we should be doing is instituting something like a universal basic income, as had been done in experiments in the Netherlands, I think it was. I can't remember where all has done experiments with it so far. But if you give everybody a minimum level of income that's divorced from the requirement of labor, then I think you can come up with a much better sort of egalitarian system.
Sounds cool. I should have done my research on this, but I don't know much about what happened. So I believe it was tried, certainly in somewhere like Denmark or Netherlands, but I think they stopped it, and I'm not sure what the reasons were for them stopping that. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Some on-the-fly research going on here.
Yeah, I'm grabbing my phone out to have a look. So are you aware what's happening with universal basic income in that country at the moment, or?
I'm not terribly, unfortunately, I don't have the hours in the day to, remain as conscious of all of the experiments that I would like to.
I've got an article up. I've got an article up from the New Scientist here. Universal basic income seems to improve employment and well-being. So this is from Finland. So that's where it was. So the world's most robust study of universal basic income has concluded that it boosts recipients' mental and financial well-being as well as modestly improving employment. Finland ran a 2-year universal basic income study in 2017 and 2018, during which the government gave 2,000 unemployed people aged between 25 and 58 monthly payments with no strings attached. The payments were of €560 per month, weren't means tested and were unconditional, so weren't reduced if any individual got a job or later had a pay rise. The study was nationwide. Selected recipients weren't able to opt out because the test was written into legislation. Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to look through to see if there's anything else about it. Do you want to carry on? I'll have a quick reading through this to see if there's anything interesting in it.
We are big supporters of universal basic income, and I think that was something that was proposed in Labour's manifesto during the last general election, if I remember rightly. And everyone sort of at the time kept saying, "Oh, where are you going to get all this money from for all these sort of social programs?" But they provided a completely detailed financial plan for every penny, and people were just too lazy to read through it.
Yeah, and that's sort of what happened with Andrew Yang in the U.S. Now, understand Andrew Yang at no point had any chance of ever becoming president. It's just not in the nature of U.S. politics for anyone who doesn't have the sort of center stage already to ever become president. What Yang himself was saying would be the major victory would be is if other people on stage started sounding like him, if other people started talking about a UBI. But people kept being like, where are you getting the money from? Where are you going to get your UBI money? You're going to cause massive inflation. And this is apparently one of the first times that the idea of a value-added tax even got brought up in the U.S. at all, at which I hear there are value-added taxes on products and services over in the U.K. So maybe you guys are already would know more about that than I would. The way I was told that it works is like actually stupidly fucking complicated. I don't know if you guys are aware of value-added taxes or anything like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, we have that on a lot of things here. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to dive between articles. And
so the one I'm finding here says that the UBI, world's largest basic income trials 2-year program in Finland, was a major flop.
Does it give a reason for that? Because the one we were just looking at seemed to think that had real benefits to people.
Reported that they were happier and healthier. Have pointed out what they see as a serious flaw. Hold on.
It's all right.
Edit all the silence out, so that's all right.
Yeah, sorry about bringing this up.
No, it's okay.
In such a way that we didn't already like have the knowings on it. Well, because we're gonna sort of be sitting in silence otherwise. Do you have editing software that you already use, or?
We have a couple of video editing programs, but I've been struggling to get to grips with them, really. I mean, the best one I found sort of puts this banner on it if you don't pay to use it, and that is not optimal. So what do you use?
I use a program called Lightworks, which is the same one used by Sean and Jen.
Oh, right. Yeah, we'll have to try that one then.
It has a small amount of like video filters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can put like chroma key on things, so if you've got a green screen, it's pretty okay.
Yeah, I ended up making a really shitty green screen for us for this Pride video that I've done recently, and I just taped some big sheets of baking paper together and just spray painted it green, and just sort of rolled it up on some cardboard tubes. Like, done.
Yeah, that's pretty good. You should be able to use chroma key with that pretty well. Okay.
So just kind of like very briefly looking up a couple of little things, sort of criticism from the left, trying to get my head around it. So you said we support it. I don't really know enough about UBI, to be honest, to make huge reasoned judgments either way, but I have heard that the left is starting to criticise it a bit. So looking at some of the criticisms, it seems to be that there is an idea that it might lead to people accepting shitty jobs with shitty wages, and those wages staying depressed because of that. And also possibly the worry is it leading to a breakdown of other social security networks and things like that. So people will have to rely on universal basic income alone, plus any job that might top that up. But then, of course, you've got people who are disabled or for whatever reason can't work, having to only rely on that. So do you think there are ways you can get around that? Yeah.
So the major objections come from people who read about UBI, which is talked about from like Milton Friedman, who was a horrendous individual, an absolutely like, racist monster. But he was like, no, we need a UBI. That way these poor, uneducated people get the fuck out of the way and stop, trying to take all the good jobs and whatnot. And, the genetically inferior people will, he was a horrendous monster. But so when I look at UBI, I look at it as you have to Boy, okay, hold on. So UBI has to be set at a certain minimum amount, or it has to be structured in such a way that, like, you. Oh,
Don't worry.
it's really hard for me to talk about because my brain starts rushing ahead.
I know exactly the same thing. I do exactly the same thing.
So a part of the problem with the UBI is going to be that you should slash minimum wage entirely when the UBI comes around, because it should be enough that you can cover your basics. Now, if you're not going to make it enough to cover your basics and you have to keep the minimum wage around, it's going to have worse results. This is, I think, part of what might have happened in Finland. So I'm reading something about another form of basic income in Finland or something. I don't know what it's talking about. But oh, you know what I just did? I have my I was pulling up tabs in the same screen as my camera.
Never mind.
Oh boy. Okay. There we go. Because what's going to happen in OBS if you pull up tabs on the same screen as your camera is it's going to start recording those screens instead of your camera, or instead of the Google Hangout.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as getting around those, I don't know if it's going to be as big of a problem as people seem to think it will be, because if people are given wealth, they're given sort of an intrinsic power. It's one of the things, it is a common criticism from the left of capitalism that money equals power. So if everybody has that money, they have some form of power. Right now, if you do not work, you have $0 worth of power in politics. You might be able to vote here in the U.S. There are places in the world where you can't, of course, vote if you don't make enough money or whatever. But as long as you have some income, you can make more of an impact than somebody who doesn't. You can make more of an impact than somebody who votes by simply having like $100. And that might sound very sort of idealistic or dismissive of voting, but I genuinely think it's true. I don't see any sort of system where a single vote among millions matters more than sending $100 off to your favorite political candidate, or buying from a product brand. And I know that carries with it a whole lot of trouble itself, because consumer identities are a huge fucking problem nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, being a gamer, being a fan of fucking anything. I know that these things are also problems, but so I personally can't see a better way to progress forward than to have something like the UBI.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the drawbacks that people are suggesting might happen. I think if you have a left movement that's strong enough to introduce a UBI, then it's also probably strong enough to stop things like disability living allowance over here being sort of cut off or reduced.
But would that mean, I mean, so for me, I suppose the thing I don't understand is why do we also have to hold up the market economies alongside that? Like, couldn't we have a socialist society that has kind of like the workers owning the means of production and all these kinds of things that all go along with socialist ideology, and have UBI at the same time? At a time, so therefore you're not going to have the bosses therefore depressing wages, because that would be my major worry about it would be.
Well, so the question actually becomes, what does worker-owned means of production mean at that point? Because you do still have bosses. You still have organizers.
Oh yeah, but there's structure, but I think money can be more fairly divided between the workers.
Right.
We don't know. I know you're obviously working for Amazon at the moment. I think Jeff Bezos.
Real quick.
Or not put that in.
We want to avoid mentioning that during the video.
I'll take that out. I wasn't sure whether
we'll make sure to edit around that, just because I don't know how the NDA quite works out there.
Yeah.
And I might end up saying shit that's considered inflammatory towards Amazon. You know how it goes.
Yeah, I did. As soon as I said that, I thought, oh, should I? But don't worry, I'll let it out. Is it okay to just mention Amazon in a...
I mean, I kind of like...
You meant... So, criticisms of Amazon, if you guys don't mind mentioning it, I'm not the one who said it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's fair enough.
Right, that's fine. So you've got the likes of Jeff Bezos, and I think he had his highest earning day ever the other day. It was 13 billion, I think. I can double check this. And in fact,
it was 13 billion. It was a pretty proudly touted number on Facebook.
Oh, right. Okay. And I just it's that kind of thing. I don't see the need for it.
Yeah. Quite grotesque.
So,
one person can have that.
Believe it or not, I think I can make a justification for Jeff Bezos making $13 billion.
Right.
And that's the sort of money that got us the steam engine. That's the sort of money that got us the biplane.
But is that money being put into anything that's sort of productive or useful for society?
Yes. So Bezos has created one of the largest, has contributed to the creation of one of the largest logistics networks in the world, hasn't he? We have next day shipping through Amazon, which helps. Go ahead.
How much of the work does he actually do himself?
He doesn't, but because he facilitates the structure, he obviously does create some value. Now, my arguments aren't going to support him making those 13 billion in total, whatever, and just holding on to it. He doesn't do that, from what I understand. He doesn't just hold on to the money. He actually does a thing that when I talk about how, when I start asking the lefties that I know, how should a business operate? He does a lot of them. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but a lot. Because what he does is he reinvests and buys up smaller businesses. And when you start talking to lefties about like, how should I, if I'm profiting in a business, be spending the money and try to get specifics out of people, it's the sort of thing people will say. You should reinvest in your business. You should make it more profitable. You should make it better for your employees. And so, like, I work a warehouse I work at actually uses a lot of automation. It's got like the robotic shelf things. So they've got these little Roombas that like lift up the shelves and like carry them around, and they're super fucking cool. That's really good for the employees because you're not walking around on concrete floor all day. No, instead you're just standing around on a concrete floor all day. It hurts if you're back. It's terrible. I love it. It's great. No, but I think that the whole Bezos having $13 billion is not necessarily a bad thing as long as there's a minimum standard of living given to everybody.
See, I have a couple of issues with it. It's that Amazon doesn't pay tax in the UK. So they earn billions and billions, and none of it goes back into the country or to sort of benefit us. He just comes here to just suck away at our money, essentially. And when sort of people have such little to live on, and there's so much poverty here, it just seems insulting that they just take and not give anything back.
Absolutely. So here's a question. How do you guys feel about a globalist government?
Yes and no. I support it in some ways. I think sort of like open borders and sort of cooperation is really important. but at the same time, sort of being able to provide for your own sort of country is also a priority and something that most countries can't do. Like when it came to the UK and Brexit, I thought maybe separating from the EU isn't a bad idea if we could provide all of our basic needs and with a standard of living. If like the EU were holding us back, then yeah, sure, separate from them. But they weren't. They provided us with better legal standards for living and employment. And yeah, so once we've separated, we're going to end up with poor quality food and we're going to struggle to get a lot of basic necessities. So, I mean, it's kind of that you have to be able to look after yourself so you can properly engage with the rest of the world and have that sort of more globalized way of living.
See, I'm not sure how. So as you know, we had this conversation about how we're kind of still finding ourselves on the left, which I think is one of the interesting things I want to explore. And I do feel fairly attracted by anarchism a little bit. So I'm not really sure how I feel about the state anyway, as an end goal, you know. But certainly under capitalism, my issue would be that the main, like, capitalism always has to be about profit. That's what it's about. That's the number one issue. So when the number one issue is profit, everything else has to come second and everything else has to be in service of that. So under the current system, I think if we had a globalized government, I mean, we have it with kind of market economies, globalization with market economies, it's all going to be about the cheap labor. It's all going to be about getting the most profit out of people. Well,
there is actually one more thing that it can do. I personally am in favor of a more formalized UN because I want it to collect taxes.
Right.
Yeah, I think that having a UN that can collect taxes and help fund national armies, because national defense is an important thing to some people.
Yeah.
I personally would much rather see national armies scaled back, but if you provide some of the funding through a global economy, you sort of get the right to keep an eye on everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
the wars down.
Yeah, it would certainly be good if the US wasn't in charge of its military budget. Which, do you know what that is? It's into the trillions, isn't it?
Oh boy, I know it's more than like every other nation on Earth. And I'm fairly certain that it's more than we spend on everything else combined, I want to say.
Makes sense.
I'm not 100%, but yeah.
Probably enough to solve global warming like that.
Yeah. And world hunger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, like the weirdest thing I've ever heard someone point out was I watch a YouTube channel called Economics Explained. And at one point they just sort of briefly in passing mentioned how we're kind of in a post-scarcity reality right now. We do produce enough food for everyone. I don't know if we actually have enough housing yet, but we produce enough goods to produce the housing for everybody that's alive right now. We're technically in a post-scarcity world. We just don't act like it.
Yeah, we just choose not to help other people.
And the reason I brought up a globalist, the reason I brought up a globalist government is because being able to collect taxes and funnel that towards social welfare, disaster relief, and helping fund national armies is the only way to accomplish getting Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the big global banks and all that. The only way you can get them to pay taxes is through a global entity. You know, right now they can do that whole thing where they go from like Ireland to Jamaica to wherever, like they put it through so many different banks that nobody can collect taxes.
We spoke about, this isn't changing the subject, by the way. We spoke about Europe very briefly earlier. You spoke about Europe, and you said there are left reasons to be anti-Europe. It's a very neoliberal organization. It just is. I mean, like everything, every government is neoliberal pretty much at the moment, but it is, it's a very neoliberal organization. Free movement, as I was talking about earlier, I'm all for free movement and open borders, but it's very much about, in Europe, it's about, cheap labor. That's
right.
what
It's about letting labor organize itself based on demand.
Yeah. Now, but there's also, the vote leave was, particularly in the UK, a very right-wing vote, and it was supported by sort of the most right-wing, free market, laissez-faire, libertarian in American terms, although not in English terms, politicians and leaders, essentially for this very reason, for the fact that Europe brings in these regulations on taxes, and I think there were plans to bring in tax dodging laws that would affect the entirety of Europe, so that these companies could at least not move about Europe and be able to dodge their taxes. And so that's one of the major reasons that there was such a pro-Brexit movement from the right, from the laissez-faire capitalists of the right, is because they want the ability to be able to dodge taxes in the UK.
Which is disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I would be amazed if it doesn't end up fucking over the UK.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, we're already suffering for it because of Brexit. We now have a problem with getting labour in this country. Like there are farms and fields that people can't find workers to pick the fruit and the vegetables, and the NHS, a big portion of that was supported by migrants who come from sort of Eastern Europe to work as nurses and things, and now they don't want to be here. And now we're having this huge problem where a lot of people are finding it difficult to access health services because there's nobody that wants to work in them anymore.
Yeah. I mean, part of that has obviously really been agitated by COVID.
Yeah.
And also underfunding. Yeah, and that's been part of the reason why British people haven't been going into nursing, for example. Not that I want to start a sort of British jobs for British workers type argument, but that has aggravated the need for nursing. It's badly paid. You have to pay a bursary in order to study. You used to get a bursary to study. You now have to pay to study. So a lot of people who train here, certainly as doctors, often actually go and work abroad. So we were very.
They'll come over here to the U.S. and
yeah, absolutely, and earn a lot of money there. So we were very reliant on people from Europe. There is such a nurse shortfall in the UK, even before COVID, and after 10 years of underfunding of our NHS, which is very deliberate, by the way. The Tories will deny this completely. They'll say, "Oh no, we believe in the NHS because it is no matter who you vote, for ordinary people, the NHS is this beloved institution. Everyone supports
it's like public schools."
Yeah, absolutely. But the Tories absolutely 100% ideologically want to destroy it.
Yeah.
Hey, just like public schools.
Yes. Yeah.
I know. I sort of just took a shot at fucking. That's the thing. Oh my God! Here in the U.S., of course, we don't have a national health service, but we do have public schools, which I don't know about the Conservative Party over there, but here in the U.S., we have to constantly fight against conservatives for public schools. It sounds like it's just about as sinister, because it's never we want to get rid of schools. It's we want to promote Christian schools. We want to promote private schooling. We want to offer your children the opportunity to go to, quote, a better school. I don't know if you guys are aware of who Betsy DeVos is, or Betsy DeVos.
I've heard of her. I'm sure I've seen like news clips about her.
Mm.
So
well,
Betsy DeVos is Trump's education secretary, I want to say.
right.
And what she's trying to push through is like a voucher program where where everybody's given a voucher to send their kid off to whatever school they want. And on its face, this looks really good. However, what it actually does is it will be diverting funding away from the public schooling program.
Right.
And because of how we fund schools, it's like this negative feedback loop. You know, I'm going to take a bit of money from the public school to put into this voucher program, and then I'm going to send my kid off to this nice white school over here, this nice private school, and it's going to get, those voucher dollars, and it's not going to get the public funding.
Right.
And because, the inner city parent can't take their kid to this suburban school, it's this huge negative feedback loop that keeps eating the goddamn U.S.
Yeah. It's not quite as dire as that over here for us for schools. Though I did read something in the Tory manifesto last election that made me think, oh, that's not great. They were talking about setting up special schools for people that have been permanently excluded. And that struck me as being a danger for segregation.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had over the past, bizarrely, so the way a lot of the private, I'd say bizarrely, the way the door was open to kind of privatisation in both the NHS and in the schooling system in the UK was through the last Labour government. And it's been a very kind of backdoor. So this was Tony Blair. And it's been a very kind of backdoor way. Now, there was already what we call PFI, Private Finance Initiative, going into hospitals under John Major. And then Tony Blair kind of upped that a lot. And there was a lot of private money that was going into hospitals. And the same thing has happened with schools. So we now have academies. So these schools basically get taken over by private businesses, which always seems really, really bizarre to me, because a business is about earning money. How it's about profit. So how are these people making profit out of schools, other than by selling land off and things like that? What are they doing to make profit? It seems very, very kind of dark to me.
Right.
But when it was under a Labour government, and I think this is one of the reasons that, one of the reasons I want to kind of basically tear down capitalism is I think it can kind of be all right and tamed when you've got a Labour government, because even though they were putting private money into hospitals, even though they were putting private money into schools, it was all very, very regulated. But as soon as the Tories came into power, all they needed to do was tear down the regulation. And because the private money was already going in, that had gone on under a Labour government, there weren't any questions. There weren't any real questions about it. And sort of stealthily over the last 10 years or so, hospitals, the NHS has, we talk about having a public health service. We don't really. It's free at the point of care, almost. We have prescription charges here. You also don't get free dentistry here. You don't, you used to. You don't get free eye care here anymore. You used to. So they have gradually been stripped back. And I very much see the same thing happening with schools. And there are sort of some religious kind of academies creeping in. These kinds of things.
I mean,
some of the things that you'll want to look out for are things like, pushing for these voucher sort of programs, and pushing for, we want to get our kids into these nicer schools, because it's never about, it's never about saying that these schools are bad, the public school is bad. It's, we want to get our kids out of these violent neighborhoods. We want to get our kids into these nicer schools.
Yeah.
And Americans really push the illusion of the freedom of choice as a thing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case here. I mean, I think I see it a bit more from America. I think you tend to believe a little bit more. People here do believe in meritocracy, and that's grown. I think we've become more and more Americanized. I mean, obviously, we're very influenced by media and politics from there. But I think even more so, like this idea of the American dream that anyone can come, you know, you can be this poor immigrant that lands on the shores of America and you can make it to be a millionaire. It's like the myth. Or it seems from our perspective to be like the myth of your nation, you know.
Yeah,
so many people have bought into that.
It really is. Actually, it's really interesting listening to your guys' perspective here, because that genuinely that's the through line with America. It's anyone can make it. Marco Rubio during the 2016 Republican generals primary, I don't fucking know which is which, but during the Republicans voting for their candidate, specifically said, we are not a nation of have and haves and have nots. We are a nation of haves and soon to haves. And I'm like, that is the dumbest fucking sentence I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I do remember. I can't remember where it comes from, but there is a reasonably famous quotation from somewhere, which is, yes, anyone can make it, but not everyone can.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do certainly have that mentality here, but it's more like, I don't know whether it is portrayed that way in the US, but certainly here it feels like it's flipped on its head, in that it's not, oh yes, you too can make it, you can be this, you can be that. It's, why haven't you made it? It's your fault. You're lazy, you're poor.
Yes.
You're lazy.
Now, has that gotten do you think that gets exaggerated under a conservative government?
Generally,
so.
yes. I mean, I have to say, I think Tony Blair really was poison in a lot of ways, because as a Labour leader, and he really was, you know, the most right-wing Labour leader we've ever had. As a Labour leader, he really did buy into a lot of the Tory myths, and he spread them. You know, like when Labour became into government under Tony Blair, one of the first things they did was start to cut back on benefits, and they would demonise people like single mothers, you know, and all the kind of people that the Tories liked to demonise. Oh yeah, you know, because they clearly, it was their fault, you know, they were having babies without thinking or whatever. And I think, and they did the same thing with immigration, in that they helped the right-wing narrative. Now, I kind of believe, maybe it comes from my work in the theatre, that one of the most important things in politics is narrative, and it's who creates the best narrative. And we had years and years and years of a Labour government holding up right-wing narratives on things such as benefit and crime prevention, and drugs, and the other thing that I mentioned, but immigration, all these different things. And now we have ended up with a country which is really right-wing on benefits and crime prevention and drugs and immigration, and they helped the Tories. And you could kind of see it happening, that as they, whilst they were in government, recreated the right-wing narrative on immigration, the Tories' position on immigration got more popular. As they held up the right-wing rhetoric on crime, the Tories' position on crime got even more popular. So I really do think that Blair's government is to blame for an awful lot, actually.
Like, and when you were talking about how important narrative is, like, I'm a gamer, so maybe I'm coming from a position that's like way too close to yours, being in the theater, because, you know, we spend our whole lives surrounded by stories. But I genuinely do think that the stories we're being told are hugely impactful. You know, the fact that for some reason every movie out there is at least minorly eugenics based is pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think it supports this whole individualism mindset.
Yeah.
Where like, not just can everybody be a hero, but you need to look up to heroes, which is an insane way of looking at the world in my mind. I don't think you look up to heroes. I think that they have to do certain things, but you shouldn't exactly be getting into the hero worship nonsense. We're not orcs.
We're having a little bit of a problem with that at the minute. Like, the government are lauding sort of the NHS workers as being heroes, and everyone's saying by doing that, that means that they're sort of doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, so you don't have to compensate them with proper wage or proper protective equipment and things like that. And it's become quite toxic.
Basically, you go out on a Thursday night and you clap the NHS, and then you vote to underfund them.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
That's going to be... Bear with me. That's my mother, but I'm hanging up on her. And I'm going to send her a message.
Probably at least shoot her a message. Honestly, like that's so fucking mad that because people in the U.S. will do that too. We don't have a national health service, but we do have hospitals where people are like, nah, our nurses they're heroes. And by heroes, I guess they mean the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the situation we're in now. Clap one day and slap the next. They voted down pay rises. Was it yesterday?
Well, yesterday we had yesterday or the day before, there was a vote, there was an amendment went forward to Parliament, which was essentially just to protect the NHS. It said that under any future trade deals done with the US or any other foreign government, that the NHS will be protected in those trade deals. It will not be up for sale, and the Tories voted it down. Now they've said, oh, no, the NHS isn't for sale, but they still voted down the amendment which would have made it enshrined in law that it was not for sale. So, make of that what you will. It almost seems as if they say one thing and do another.
Man, it sounds like there's a really uncomfortable fusion of Republicans and British conservatives happening.
Yeah. Yes, I think there is. I mean, you've had Nigel Farage over there, haven't you?
Oh God, he talks to Prager a lot, doesn't he? Is Prager Canadian or is he American?
I don't know. We can't tell the difference between the accents here.
I watched several videos on him, and now I can't remember.
No,
Dennis Prager's an American conservative talk show host. Yeah. Boy. And that man. I was introduced to him back a couple of years ago when I was watching I think it was Hank Green doing I think it was Crash Course.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, going through Crash Course videos, and I see this thing called PragerU, and I'm like, the fuck is this nonsense? It's an entire 5-minute video about how, I don't know, black people are bad or something. Jesus.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is apparently a university, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was, it was before I learned about incognito mode, so I absolutely refused to watch any of their videos.
Yeah, same.
But I would go through and watch a bunch of the reactions to their videos.
Yeah.
It's part of how I found Sean and Jen, which led me into the rest of LeftTube, actually. So I guess, thanks, Dennis Prager.
It's funny. It's exactly the same as what I've done. It's the same thing. I wouldn't wanted to do it before Incognito, and also so for example, recently with the J.K. Rowling rant, I couldn't read it. It just would have made me too angry and too depressed. And so actually, it was thanks to Vaush that I could. Because he did a takedown on it that was really sweary, and his way of doing stuff, it was a funny takedown. It just kind of tore it apart, and that was exactly what I needed to see to be able to hear what she had said. Just someone completely taking it apart like that.
Yeah, I did eventually myself move past that because I was honestly just after so long of listening to certain left content creators, it gets tiring. I'm not a fan of ContraPoints. I know that's not a very controversial thing, but
I mean,
I don't like her aesthetic.
I mean, I've only seen like one or two of her videos. They seemed alright, but I say I haven't seen enough to really know if I'm a fan or not.
No, same.
Yeah.
Which is
But
strange. Sorry.
yeah, no, I ended up moving past that after I realized incognito mode was an option, which apparently keeps something about it messes with the AdSense and whatnot if you watch videos in incognito mode.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm you don't want to. I don't want anyone like quoting me on that because it was like I heard a vague reference to it in passing in like watching somebody else because what they did was they were going to watch a video and then they're like, wait, hold on, and they click over to incognito mode and it's like, I'm not giving this bitch my AdSense or whatever. And I'm like, wait, is that a thing? Does incognito mode do that? Man, that would have made watching that one really cringe music video a lot easier.
Yeah.
Because Jesus Christ, there's a lot of cringe music videos out there now that YouTube exists.
Yeah.
It's really nice that YouTube exists to allow any individual to make money and to put their voice out there, but I really wish that some of the people who put their voice out there would shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So you've got your election coming up fairly soon.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't like to say it publicly, but I'm convinced Trump is going to win.
Yeah.
Because the left isn't going to rally behind Biden.
No.
There's just too much poison against anyone who's not Bernie.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to get people to do is instead vote for, if you're not going to vote for Biden, I want people to vote for Jo Jorgensen, and this is not because I believe in her platform. I want people to vote for Jo Jorgensen because apparently if a third-party candidate gets something like 15% of the vote during the next presidential election cycle, they are given stage time. They're given media coverage time. Like they're given a lot of the performance stuff that other candidates get, that the Democratic and the Republican candidate get. And I don't like libertarians. I don't much care for the Republican team. However, I do believe in this sort of pragmatic approach to politics. So if you're not going to vote for Biden, vote for the candidate who will act as sort of a spoiler for the other team.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's I know that I don't like talking about it publicly because the thing is, and when I say stuff like that, I come across as an asshole because I am, but I don't want that being part of my image. I don't want people knowing I think like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it is really important to think through elections strategically.
Yeah.
Right now in the U.S., the left has the option. You can vote for Biden or you can vote for Trump or you can vote for the future.
Yeah.
Voting for somebody you actually like is going to take votes away from somebody else you might like in the future.
Yeah.
So Jo Jorgensen is a libertarian. They are, the way I've seen, they flip between Republican light and Republican but more insane.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're sort of all about freedom, but that freedom means something very weird, which is kind of very pro-capitalist, and that it doesn't seem to understand that like the system as it works doesn't really work how they think it does.
Right.
Makes sense.
So I think that they our two primary like third parties are the Greens and the Libertarians.
So why is
I
it
think they're the ones. What's
I
that?
was just going to say why would it therefore be better to give the vote to, was it Jo Jorgensen? I haven't read much about her.
So I might be mispronouncing her name. I might be completely misremembering her name, but she's so insignificant in this math. So because she is her party is more or less Republican too. What I see it doing is splitting the Republican vote.
Right.
Which effectively acts as a stronger Democratic base now.
Right.
Because you have a 1/2 Republican vote here, another half Republican vote here, but you still have that the full Democratic vote you already had.
Yeah,
that makes sense. It's sort of like the the Lib Dems in the UK generally split the left vote. Although there are Tory centrists who might swing towards Lib Dems, particularly over Europe, it's actually far more destructive to the left, and certainly was in the last general election. I mean, there were various seats where if the vote hadn't been split between Labour and Lib Dems, Labour would have won. So I suppose it's a similar thing, but helping the Democrats rather than helping the Conservatives here.
Right. A lot of people here in the U.S. are talking. A small number of the left here in the U.S. are talking about Howie Hawkins, who is with the Green Party, which are, from what I understand, your more left libertarian types. It's your their main thing seems to be environmentalism and also being completely goddamn insane. But
sounds like the Greens here, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. What we call here is Tories on bikes.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. But they tend to act more as spoilers for the Democratic side.
Yeah.
Because they have the whole, we need to take care of the goddamn planet. The planet's still on fire, guys. But also, I think they might still be Republicans.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to the Greens here. Yeah.
See, they're very ineffectual. And like during the last election, their policies for like a Green New Deal were not as good as Labour's. And sort of environmentalism is their one thing, and they can't even do that properly.
Right.
But then, to be fair, we did have a very good Labour manifesto on the environment at that point.
Yeah, for that short time.
Yeah.
Now it's all
was that under Corbyn or?
It was, yeah, and it was the Business and Environment Secretary. It was Rebecca Long Bailey. There were various others. I don't want to just mention her, and then if anyone is ever listening to this, guys, no, it wasn't just her. It was
right.
It was a whole, but Rebecca Long Bailey, who then ran for leader after Corbyn, but unfortunately, she was the leader we both voted for because she was the left leader. And funnily enough, going back to what we spoke to at the beginning, she touted the idea of UBI, I believe, particularly under COVID. Which I think, that's kind of like a whole nother issue on its own. But yeah, so she was the Green New Deal was just fantastic. It was just a kind of new, like a new industrial revolution, but with the environment, with jobs at its heart.
I'm assuming what she was pushing for was things like extra production in wind and solar energy.
It was hugely comprehensive. Like it was jobs, it was housing, it was industry, it was agriculture. It had the economy at its heart. It was this amazing piece of legislature, which is and it's I almost feel like saying Green New Deal loses it. Like when we have these big policies, Like, I think it's great that they have names like that, and I think that name, and I know in the US, because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been pushing stuff around the Green New Deal, hasn't she?
Okay, so my favorite thing about the Green New Deal from AOC is that it was still nonsense. It didn't do anything.
Really?
Which it sounds like your version of the Green New Deal. So what AOC's version of the Green New Deal did was it was talking about setting targets, and that's it.
Right.
It was talking about a general idea shift.
Right. Yeah, no, ours was policy-based.
Right. And I think what happened is when was this Green New Deal starting to be pushed?
So
your version.
It was central to the 2019 manifesto. I believe between sort of 2016 and 2019, they were, it was a really comprehensive thing. They were going around the country. They were talking to businesses. They were talking to they were talking to scientists, various different groups to kind of push the ideas of the Green New Deal.
That only really came out in September of last year.
Yeah.
Okay. So that actually puts off what I was thinking there, because I was like, maybe people were confusing like AOC's Green New Deal with the European. Nope, doesn't sound like it at all. It sounds like, if there was a transaction there at all, it was from AOC talking about the idea to your side talking about it.
Totally. Yeah. And what's interesting is, from what you said, because I didn't realise this, because I had heard Green New Deal. You're definitely right there. It came from the US. And of course, I mean, that makes sense because it plays on FDR's New Deal, doesn't it? That's where it comes from. And it's a great slogan, but not much else. And it's funny because it makes sense that in the US, it was this slogan that, because it didn't really, as you're saying, didn't really seem to have like that much behind it. But in the UK, it's like all that has survived is the slogan. Like, people say Green New Deal, we need a Green New Deal, but actually not really talking about anything
about what it does,
what it actually means and does. Yeah.
Wait. Oh God. So once again, those great American imports to your politics, right?
Yeah.
Pure ideology. Is what we're exporting to the world. Jesus. It's nothing but lighting and fanfare. God damn it.
Yeah.
That's actually really disappointing, because like when I first heard the conservatives being like, no, AOC's Green New Deal is going to destroy American factories and put everybody out of jobs, I'm like, oh God, how good is this policy that conservatives are saying these things?
Yeah.
Like, how great must this policy be? And then I go and I listen to a couple of people talking about it. I go and like read stuff, and I'm like, hold on. This is the Paris Climate Accord.
Yeah. Right.
Because again, the Paris Climate Accord, that was another thing that like, it didn't actually do anything. It was that when, oh my God, when Trump stepped out of that, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
This is just
yeah.
It's just a method of shaming people. Come on, buddy. You can deal with a bit of shame. Look at how much shame you bring to your people.
Yeah.
We have concerns, going back to sort of the election question. We think that he's going to declare like an emergency situation, then there won't be one.
I've been trying to ignore that thought.
Sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly okay. It's something that really has to be faced. That it's entirely possible that he's going to. And how should you respond? I mean, like, part of me is like, man, maybe I should already be working on trying to get some form of German citizenship thing or whatnot. But of course, right now, Americans can't. From what I understand, Americans, because of the COVID situation, are not allowed. We're blacklisted in most of the world. I don't know if I'd even be able to start on any sort of citizenship paperwork or anything like that because of the situation. Now, I don't know because I'm also really dumb and lazy. So, but I'm here to represent all Americans. Goddamn.
So what is happening where you are with COVID at the moment? What's the rules you're working under?
So from what I understand, we're here in Maryland. We're still under the mandatory masks thing. Governor Hogan is trying to reopen restaurants and stuff like that, but he seems to be one of the more sensible of the governors. That's it. Sorry, there's a lot of different steps in U.S. politics. Because we've got states and we've got we've got the mayor, the governor. There's I can't remember all the different fucking offices between me and president. But yeah, Governor Hogan's been doing a pretty decent job. He's been doing weekly or every day almost. It seems like he's doing some sort of press release. I remember he a couple months back, apparently personally did a deal with Vietnam or Korea or something to get a bunch of test kits, and President Trump threw a fit about that.
Right.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic listening to Trump be his normal fucking whiny self because somebody's actually doing something.
Yeah.
Oh, and I don't. So on Facebook, I've been seeing this thing where Trump's worn a mask for the first time ever, and people are like, "Oh my God, he's finally doing it. He's finally." The thing that they always do, when your child finally stops shitting themselves in public.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday.
Yeah, I've been seeing it.
Finally admitted that it's not a fake.
The thing is, I think it is going to earn him votes.
What, wearing the mask or saying it's a fake?
Yes. No, wearing the mask. Nice. So the thing is, he's a con man.
Yeah. Totally.
And the thing with that, what you're going to find is because he previously denounced it, the conspiracy theory people are already on side. He doesn't need to sell to them anymore.
Yeah.
Now he needs to get everybody else on side. So what's he going to do? He's going to be, okay, I'll do a token gesture. I'll throw on the fucking mask once or twice and be like, this is a real threat to Americans.
Yeah.
He'll shotgun out the word America 7 billion times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been seeing a lot of news reports from America about people becoming really violent and aggressive in stores for being asked to wear masks.
Yes.
That might be sort of a kind of future we face soon, because as of Friday, it's become sort of strongly advised, if not mandatory, to wear masks in shops.
Yeah, there's no mandatory mask wearing here at the moment, apart from public transport. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of people have been arguing it for a long time. I mean, I remember when the Chinese scientists came over, sort of right at the beginning of March, when we still weren't under bloody lockdown, they came and they just went, "Why are you guys not wearing masks? Why are you behaving like this?" There's just kind of incredulous belief, because I mean, what we were told at the beginning of March was, "Oh yeah, there's this virus. What you need to do is wash your hands and sing happy birthday." That was the first advice we got.
Right.
And lots of people were going all the scientific advice was coming out from places like the Lancet, which is the top medical journal here, saying we should be locking down. This is what we should be doing. So people started to put pressure on the government. So we locked down far too late. We were just behind Italy. We could see Italy's trajectory.
Yeah.
And we could see we were on if you were a person that was informed, you could see you were on a worse trajectory than Italy. So we locked down far too late. We came out of lockdown far too early. The pubs have been open for what?
Couple of weeks?
Yeah, at least a week or two now. And they decided, in their wisdom, they didn't open pubs, on a Wednesday when not many people are going to go. They decided the best time to open pubs was on a Saturday evening.
Yeah.
So
Crowds, floods of people into cities, into towns to go out drinking for the first time in months.
Yeah.
And it was just a nightmare.
And I think our death rate per capita might be worse than yours. I'm pretty certain the UK in terms of numbers per population
I think it is. But I mean,
you're talking COVID specific or just?
Yeah. But then that's sort of counting on how many people you're testing. I know Trump is sort of against testing as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, our testing has been pretty bad as well. But yeah, no, that's true. It hasn't been as bad as the US.
Yeah, I mean, here there's been a lot of people sort of die at homes or in care homes, and people have been, medical officials been strongly advised not to write down COVID as cause of death, even though that's clearly what happened. So
our doctors and nurses have been told they're not allowed to speak if they, like, we live under these, you know, the kinds of things that are said in our society. If it was happening in China, our media would be reporting it as like the death of democracy and this state dictatorship, and it's happening here.
Honestly, if it was happening in a book, you'd be like, listen, you need to tone it back. You're way overwriting this.
Yeah. And our medical professionals have been told, you know, that they could lose their jobs if they publicly speak out about lack of protection. Our media isn't really, I mean, if you compare the way Italy, that we were about 2 weeks behind, you know, the way the death rate was reported from the UK about Italy, it was reporting it as this real mass tragedy, which obviously it was, this real mass tragedy. The death rate here has not been reported in the same way. It's just like we have our media is just completely under the control of the government, isn't it? I mean, it's
I mean, I think a really good example of this is we have an MP. I'm not sure what her constituency was, but because they sort of shut down Parliament for the lockdown, she got a job working in a care home, and she was donating her wages from that to charity. And they fired her for speaking out about how they weren't being given any protective equipment. And I thought that was just shocking, that she's going this extra mile to sort of help the country, and she's repaid by sort of being sacked.
Yeah, and the care home deaths here have been appalling. People have just been left to die in care homes, and carers have not been given the proper protective equipment, you know, to be able to make sure that they're sterile before kind of going and seeing people.
I mean,
just awful.
Late last year, my grandmother, who was in a home, passed away, and that's almost a relief that she didn't have to sort of fall victim to this.
Right.
That's sort of how bad things have been over here.
Oh God. Yeah, I actually just looked up the numbers, and it looks like the UK is the deaths per capita is higher in the UK, which I had no clue. I thought the UK was doing significantly better than the US per capita.
No, we're doing pretty badly. And I think it probably, you know, you talked about all those structures that you've got, you know, in between, like you said, in between you and president.
Right.
I think that's probably been a big factor. We don't have that. And I think
the different governors have been doing their own kind of good and bad jobs going on there. Like Cuomo from New York overseeing a state that had one of the news stories that came out of New York was like they had bodies in refrigerated trucks because they had no room to store people, to store the bodies. And like that's a little fucking horrifying, at least.
I saw some news reports that there were mass graves in, like, was it New York?
New York.
Just huge ditches just full of the dead. And it was like, oh God, it's terrible. Like, how did it become that bad?
Right. How could it have possibly gotten that bad? Like we should be getting more federal oversight, but our federal government, our federal government's head right now is sort of refusing to take any responsibility. But like you said, I guess it's sort of, there is the benefit in the U.S. where the U.S. is more like the EU than a country.
Yeah.
It's more like a collection of different countries.
Yeah, I certainly get that impression. Yeah, and it's very much, I think, England here as well. Like, so Wales, so there is some devolution of power in Wales and Scotland. So they have kind of got to make they've been allowed to, I think, more or less make their own decisions, and they have certainly given their own advice. And certainly Scotland has, obviously, because they have a sensible leader. I mean, her politics don't chime with mine. She's very much a liberal leftist, but, you know, she's sensible.
Better than what we've got now.
Yeah, and they're down to, I think they might have even had no deaths per day recently.
Really?
I'm not sure, but they're certainly doing a lot better than us. It's very, very England-centred that the issues are.
Yeah. Oof. Sorry, this moves on to a really depressing. Honestly, no, it started out on depressing topics because, face it, economics is the most depressing topic in the world because it's the grim job of determining who deserves to starve.
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that would be no one.
Yeah.
Well,
Empathy is too radical, apparently.
Yeah. And it is hard to actually reach the point where nobody is starving, even if you are in a post-scarcity society as we are, because you have so many extant factors. Like, you know, how do we make sure nobody in South America, in Iraq, or in South America, the Middle East, Africa, Russia, the U.S., like, how do we make sure all of these people get to eat, regardless of their current political situation? How do you make sure that they're getting fed instead of, I know back in the 90s, the last time I ever fucking paid attention to anything in Africa, because Africa confuses, scares, and upsets me. Like there was it was back during the 2000s, like talk of aid going into Africa and warlords sweeping up the aid that was going into the area. And I'm pretty sure that rhetoric is still being used in the US, even if, you know, most people in the US don't know about anything going on in Africa.
Yeah, well, that's probably why, isn't it? Because then you can say it and it doesn't have to actually be true. I mean, I don't know what's happening in different places. You know, it's quite easy to just make something up, as we saw with Iraq. I mean, I suppose it's the interesting thing about, in a way, being a socialist, being anti-capitalist, is that, you know, I wanted, as I described earlier, you know, my issue with capitalism is number one has to be profit. It's always got to be. That's the number one. But then, okay, let's say our governments, the UK, we live in a parallel world.
Oh, hold on, you just sort of Google just kind of took a crap on your audio there. Could you restart that sentence?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
hold on. Sorry, we're getting a lot of latency issues.
Right.
All right, let's see here. I have no idea what I'm gonna try to do, but I'm gonna bandwidth up to. Yeah.
I'm surprised my internet's been holding up.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Try again. So, with let's say UK, we live in a parallel world, and we managed to get whether it was through representative democracy with Jeremy Corbyn or revolution or whatever, we managed to get a socialist government or a socialist society. We're still living in a capitalist world, which is going to do everything to stop that. You know, like
now,
we will be punished for socialism.
Real quick, I don't know if I've ever gotten from an individual, well, from any collection of individuals, what is socialism?
So
what does it mean?
For me, I'd say the main thing is around what we were speaking about at the beginning. In purely economic terms, it's about the workers owning the means of production. You know, so for me, it's an end to bosses. It's an end to, I think a lot of people call themselves socialists when either they're not, or, you know, if they're MPs or if they're politicians, they might be socialists in their heart, but they're not pushing socialist policies.
No. Okay. So what does the system look like? How does socialism, because again, I was talking about this before, not today, probably in the stream or whatever. I tend to think in systems. So like when I talk about capitalism, the way capitalism works at its core is the exchange of currency for goods and services, right? That's commerce. That's the center of capitalism. So what is socialism? Is socialism supposed to be like the next step of capitalism? Is it supposed to be market free? Is it?
I mean, I suppose it sort of depends who you ask. It's interesting to say it as the next step of capitalism, but I suppose in some ways I would see it as that. In that I sort of almost see it as a transition period. So I don't
towards the Marxist communist, right?
Yeah.
Because that's even the way isn't that the way that the Marxist dialectic goes? Is like
I mean, I haven't read huge amounts of Marx. I really should. But my socialism
dude's writing was pretty bad.
Yeah. I haven't been able to get through the Capital. No, my socialism is mainly more practical than theoretical, I suppose.
I mean, I guess for me, sort of, the system of socialism should be the fair exchange of money for labour instead of what we have at the minute under capitalism, which is sort of the exploitation of labour for extra money, really. I see it sort of balancing out to be more fair, where people are actually paid the worth of their time instead of just being sucked dry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes it. I think that's definitely what I would say. Yeah.
And the reason I asked that is because, like, you understand that what you just said there is actually really, really hard to quantify in any way. Like, what is my time worth? And one of the major criticisms I have of the online left, not the left itself, the online left, is when I bring up the idea, okay, there's a Twitch streaming group called the Incredibly Online Left, Extremely Online Left, something like that. It's just like 3 or 4 guys who do streaming every now and again about politics and leftism, and they talk about how everybody should be paid fairly for their labor. And so I bring up, okay, so what do you know about the company that produced your camera or your microphone or your computer? You know, what do you know about what goes into that? Do you think the people who provide those things are treated fairly? And what I get is, oh, you got me there, buddy. They don't actually engage with the topic. The thing is, my criticism of the online left is that nobody wants to engage with their content.
Right. Yeah. I see what you mean.
So what does fair pay look like here? Hassan Piker is a relatively well-known online left content creator who recently got in some hot water with a lot of left-leaning and even centrist types who got really mad at him because he's one of the bigger streamers, and he was not paying for his art.
Right.
Or wasn't paying enough for his artists.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk to someone like me and I hear about that shit, I get mad.
Yeah.
You know, this person making $150 a month working for one of the biggest streamers out there, no, that's not acceptable. I paid y'all the however much it was for just a couple of screens.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think how much I paid you is not enough, actually, because it is something I plan to use for my stream, for something I hope that adds value to me.
Yeah.
So when I talk about any form of socialism, leftism, I actually want to talk about it specifically in that context because I believe markets are good. I believe markets incentivize individuals working together. If you don't have a market, how do you know what something's worth? Like, can I just say, I want a shirt and you have to give me a shirt? You know, without a market, how does that transaction work?
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because markets also, I mean, they do. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, things are not worth what they're worth in a market. A market essentially just decides what something's worth.
Yeah, because nothing has intrinsic worth.
No, exactly.
Like, you know, I can say that my robot's worth 12 beats, but what is a beat? What is it worth? You know, you're asking an entirely philosophical question there. So what if I just say one wheat is 1 shekel?
I suppose a socialist argument would be hours of labour, wouldn't it?
You could use that argument, and it's I think a okay one. But then, does that mean that a doctor is not worth as much as, say, the person who I stand there for 10 hours putting stuff into boxes, and a doctor might see you for 15 minutes. So does that mean that the doctor who went through those years of education to see you for 15 minutes isn't as valuable as me who puts stuff in boxes for 10 hours? It's I kind of like the concept behind where we're at right now, because what the idea that I see for how economics should work is based on value adding services and stuff. So like if you go and you dig raw iron out of the ground, you're producing raw iron. But then we ship it off to somewhere else and it gets refined into iron bars and gets fucking whatever. You know, we're going to talk about this like it's RuneScape or something. You know, you take it to a furnace and it gets converted into iron bars. Well, those iron bars are worth more. The person then who does that job, assuming they do it for the same amount of time or with the same amount of effort, whatever, is worth more than the person who did the original extraction, right?
Yeah.
Because the end product has that additional value.
I mean, I don't know. I think if it wasn't for the person digging it out of the ground, they wouldn't have had the product to give that extra value to anyway.
So how much is a can of Coke under your system then? Because there's so many base products that go into a can of Coke.
Yeah.
That you're reaching a if you're saying that each of those people is worth the same amount, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with, again, because the value added services, I don't know how under that system you would value anything.
Yeah.
There is also another problem. So I'm just bringing up more problems.
Yep.
So for example, for me, my job in the theatre, I can't kind of like it's not something that I can do consistently. You know, it's something that has to be done in periods of time.
Moment.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think this kind of like all comes back to universal basic income, where actually, whilst I see problems under the current system, under a socialist system, I think actually universal basic income could work
in that favor
pretty well.
Yeah.
I think you just said that backwards, though, because I think the UBI is the socialist system.
Right. Yeah.
It's one of those things I try to slowly introduce left-leaning people to, is when you're talking about socialism, you're literally talking about the UBI.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking, you want to say that the workers own the means of production, but that actually doesn't mean anything. I can own a lathe. I own a screwdriver. It's sitting right there. It's an electric handheld screwdriver, and it's been sitting in that box for over a month. I own that screwdriver. It is a means to produce value. I own this computer. It's another means to produce value. That was one of the, going back to the Hassan Piker thing, that was one of the things he said as justification for paying that artist rather low, because he gave that person a computer. You now own the means of your own production. That makes everything okay. No. Owning the means of production is meaningless. When people talk about owning the means of production, what it sounds like to me is that you're getting a portion, a dividend of the extracted excess value, or of the total value. So I don't need to own Amazon in order to say that maybe I, as an individual, do deserve some of the benefit of Amazon's existence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I got a bit too rambly there or something.
No.
That's all right.
No, it does make sense. I guess I just don't trust capitalists at all.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, you've been put in this position where you can't, right? The system that we're currently under, you can't trust capitalists. You can't trust anyone right now. Like, it's a bit heartbreaking to say, but you can't even really necessarily trust the person that you're in some sort of intimate relationship with, because there's this constant conflicting power dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And when you like, a big thing I liked about Andrew Yang is that a lot of his messages were about working together, sort of bringing people together and letting people do as they want. I mean, shit, the communist maxim is supposed to be from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs. And like, when I heard Andrew Yang speak, that's what I was hearing just over and over again, essentially.
Sure.
Not literally, but in its essence.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, when people are talking about socialism, what I'm hearing is UBI, is everybody getting their basic market value. Because at that point, if you've got a basic value, you're at least worth something. You can find somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And that's one that maybe your distrust of capitalists might rail against when I say, if you have any value, you can find somewhere to live.
Yeah.
Because that distrust of capitalists might tell you that, no, that's literally not true. With the UBI, the housing prices will increase.
Mm.
But
yeah, this is exactly what I meant. Yeah. That was exactly the kind of thing I meant when I said my distrust of capitalists. Yeah.
So that's actually an argument that I field a lot from Americans, because of Andrew Yang recently being such a popular figure. My argument actually comes from I like to try to think of positive things as sinisterly as possible. And I came up with this sort of concept idea for if there was a UBI. Do you know the term? Okay, so I'm almost certain y'all are not hugely into like the anime community or the gaming community or anything like that.
Anime.
Yeah, you're a bit more than me. Yeah.
But as far as like the community aspect of it, like all the jargon and whatnot.
Yeah.
So in anime communities, there is a character type known as the NEET. It stands for not in education. It's not in education, employment, or training.
Right.
And this is this is your WoW nerd who sits at home, just sits in his mom's basement all day playing video games, right? And so if you're going to build an economy out of the UBI, that's who you want to build it off of, right? Mm-hmm. You want to build it off of the laziest scrounger available.
Yeah. So
let's say everybody gets $1,200 a month. Well, I'm gonna build. I'm sure you guys have them. Those concrete towers that are essentially storage boxes for many, many humans.
Yeah.
They're high density housing. They're not very high quality. Mm-hmm. I'd essentially build one of those and make rent $1,000 a month. What's that, you little neats? You get $200 a month for video games and food and all of that. We'll provide you with the electricity. We'll even provide you with internet and food and water and all that. Why? Because I want to be as sinister as possible, right? I don't want you going out and meeting other people, so we're going to bring the food to you. I don't want you going out I don't want you ever leaving this place, so we're going to provide you with internet. We're going to disincentivize you from getting a job. And when I think about the most sinister version of an economy where everybody wants to make as much money as possible, mm-hmm. If I think about the UBI, I'm thinking about the NEET economy. This where there are these fucking high rises all over the place, these disgusting high density housing units. And I don't like that. To me, it doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like such a minor horror in my mind, and everybody I talk to about it is like, wow, that actually sounds like a really nice place to live. And then I start talking about hostile architecture, hostile infrastructure design, and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Because are you familiar with hostile infrastructure?
Vaguely.
Yeah, vaguely. So do explain, because I'm sure I've heard it.
I'm sure we'll have viewers that would need
hostile infrastructure, I don't know if you would have seen on a municipal level, you'll see things like, have you ever seen sidewalks with those weird bumps on them?
I don't know. Don't know that I have.
So, it's a thing here in the U.S. You'll see sometimes there's like, it's like these, sometimes they're like painted outline, sometimes they're like rubber, and they have these weird bumps in them. That's just supposed to be like people don't loiter there.
Yeah, we've had them to stop homeless people from sleeping there,
right?
And things like that.
I was about to say the homelessness spikes.
Yeah.
Which is a literal thing here in the U.S. I don't know if that's a thing over in the U.K.
Yes, we have had it here. Yeah.
But there's even more subtle versions. So there are buildings that'll be built with their floors, where it's kind of like that. I think it is. It's just it's a very subtle angle, mm-hmm. and it's an anti-loitering technique. Mm-hmm. Because it puts a bit of pressure onto your foot in a way that's uncomfortable. You start shifting back and forth, and your hips start hurting.
Right. Yeah.
It's an intentional design to keep you from standing in one spot too long. They'll use it in shopping malls and the like.
Yeah.
Music choices. There will be some canned pop music that intentionally is designed to keep older people out. There is country music designed to keep younger people out of places.
Right.
And it's all supposed to be this subtle stuff that, it's supposed to direct you where to go and to get the fuck out of my store after 30 minutes.
Yeah. We have a few things like that are less subtle. Like we have these sort of alarms that are designed for only under 25s to hear, and they ring to stop teenagers loitering around. And I hate them. I think it's an awful way to treat people.
Right? It's such... Now, I will talk about that in context of like my NEET towers and stuff like that, because I'm trying to make it as unpleasant of a thing as possible. But like the more practical way you're going to do this is you're going to buy up old schools, or you're going to buy up old apartments and hotels, and you're just going to rent it out to people for just under, because you always want to aim just under the UBI if a UBI is going to exist, because you want everybody to be able to afford it, right? I don't care if you're on fucking cocaine or whatever and you're tearing up the roof every morning, because I have a guaranteed source of income every month. That is much better than, not.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about a distrust of capitalists, it comes out of the current system where you have a $0 worth, where without sacrificing part of your life, you're effectively worthless. And it's really harsh to say that. I'm sorry to be so mean.
It's true. And I think it is. With things like housing, I'm of the opinion of free housing for all, to be honest. I think there should be basic things which are free, amongst which housing, food is another, basic clothing, that kind of thing. It's, that is exactly the way that things are, that if you are not productive within the capitalist society, then you are worthless, and you could be caring for 3 kids, and you could be a parent that's spending all your time educating those 3 kids and giving them a great life, but you're worthless because you're not producing labor for someone else. And that's kind of what I want to move away from. And it's funny whenever people talk about, oh, well, what about these people that don't want to work and are lazy and are this, that? And my answer is, what about them?
Right? They actually don't even detract that. So one of the craziest things that keeps when that keeps coming up with the UBI thing, I'm like, okay, so most people actually won't stop working. And I actually, there's the phenomenon here in the U.S. It might happen in the UK. Everybody wants to start a rap career. Everybody thinks that.
Yes, I went to New York years ago. And all these people kept coming up to me on the street and trying to sell me
their burned CDs. Yeah.
See, I've only ever met one person here who wanted to be a rapper, and I met them at sort of this art thing, some kind of play, I think it was, and she said to me that she felt inside that she was a woman, but because she was in this rap career, she could only be a woman at the weekends, and she had this big beard, and she said, I have to pretend to be a man during the week for the sake of my career. And she was the only rap artist I've ever met. It's not popular here.
It's actually why I think the UBI could get started in the US significantly easier than just about anywhere else, because everybody's like, no, I'm gonna be a YouTuber, I'm gonna start a rap career, I'm gonna do these other things.
This is one of the things I think about stuff like that, and whether it's UBI or whatever, a welfare system that actually works and doesn't make people subsist in poverty, or whatever sort of society you're creating, where you having to be in work isn't an issue. It will increase creativity,
right?
And there was a big thing funny enough, I spoke about Blair earlier, and this was something that happened under Blair. So welfare here, it used to be called the dole. You were on the dole, and the dole was something that you could live on reasonably in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, because it was reasonable, and housing then was cheap. Not like it is now, and a lot of bands sprung up from that period, because they were able to write and compose and do all these things on the dole. And then when it got to the late 90s, and when Blair went, oh no, we're going to punish you for being on benefits, I actually remember quite a few musicians saying, well, actually, we survive on benefits so that we can write. And now that they aren't there anymore, we can't write anymore.
Yeah. So I was talking to a left-leaning group, well, not a group, because the guy did not apparently really approve of me actually talking to the group, called Real Progressives. And I'm like trying to talk to the group itself about this idea, but of course it has to go through the admins, and the admin's like, well, I'll explain to you why jobs guarantee is better than the UBI. And we go back and forth on that. And I bring up the rap god thing because so there's a lot of stuff that I tend to bring up in favor of the UBI. I actually like to bring up real quick. How do you guys feel about talking about really crude subjects?
Fine,
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when talking about the UBI, I tend to bring up masturbation, sex work, and my theoretical rap career a lot.
That's a great mix.
Yeah, because the thing is, I believe that economics and society should serve the lowest individuals. You think of the worst people in the world. These are going to be your drug addicted former murderers who like don't work at all, the people who genuinely just take everything. Those are the people society should serve. Because if you serve them, then everybody else gets floated. Everybody else moves upward.
I agree, yeah.
And so
an argument
like
I make quite a lot, maybe in a slightly different way, but I've made that argument quite a lot. I said it's an argument that I've made quite a lot in a slightly different way. But yeah, it's certainly one I've made.
No, I actually aim to make my arguments in the least like viscerally appealing way. I tend to try to make them kind of disgusting because man, the way I judge people, and I do judge people a lot, is I make these disgusting arguments, and if they respond too poorly to them, you're not worth it. You are not worth talking to. Like I once walked into the mayor's office wearing a shirt with all sorts of stains on it, smelling absolutely terrible, wearing scrubs and like sandals, staggering. I looked like shit. I hadn't showered for a couple of days. It was gross. And I sat down and I chatted with the mayor, and he didn't even flinch. He didn't he showed no visible changes on his face. I'm like, this is fantastic. And I sit up because I'm 6'3" in real life. I'm 6'3", several hundred pounds. Like I'm not a small dude. So, I sit up, I look tall and whatever. I'm capable of looking and sounding very confident sometimes. But I go with this style of discussing things with people because I want to know that this person's never going to respond to my grandfather as though he doesn't matter. Because my grandfather was a drunk. My grandfather didn't. He spent a lot of his life on unemployment. He spent a lot of his life drunk, and I don't want people like that being treated bad. I don't think it's worth talking to somebody who's gonna just see someone like that and just write them off.
Yeah,
I don't ever want to hear the argument. I'll never give poor people, or I'll never give a homeless man money because he'll just go spend it on booze and drugs. So what? So what? You know what? He'll work himself out of the evolutionary chain, but like if you drink.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you saying that does remind. I can't remember who it was, but a comedian once said, when people say to me a homeless person is just going to spend it on alcohol and drugs, I just turn to them and say, what did you think I was going to spend it on?
That's fantastic. That sounds like something from like Dennis Leary or something.
Yeah.
But no, sorry, going back to the real progressives, in a lot of the Macro and Cheese podcasts that I listened to, there was this weird argument that kept coming up that humans need work to have value, and not that other people are, not that it's me authoritatively saying that about other people. It's the statement that internally it's needed. In order to feel valuable, humans need employment. Yeah. And that is the worst argument I've ever heard from a humanist standpoint.
Yeah. I mean,
like that was the argument that the Protestants used to maintain slavery here in the U.S. for so long.
Yeah. And the thing we believe is that if you give people the basic means to survive, they will find they will progress on that by finding things to work on for themselves, like art. They will chase their own dreams and passions, and they will be productive in their own way in time. Like without all those pressures. People don't generally just want to sit around all day and do absolutely nothing. They want to feel valuable, but that takes so many different forms for different people, and you shouldn't be applying these weird standards of what you need to do to be worth something to society.
Yeah, no, I have on my Twitter like a porn star that I regularly talk about with about tabletop RPGs. I have a supervillain who's also a Facebook advertising manager.
Nice.
There's a streamer who might be might be a woman, might be a stuffed animal. Like, and these are the sorts of people that I use as examples. And of course, the example I always go back to is always going to be my theoretical rap career. I'm never going to start a rap career. It's never going to happen. I'm sorry. But so many people here in the U.S. know somebody or are somebody who's like, no, I'll make it as a rapper. And they put themselves out there. They hustle 24/7. They have earned money, but they don't make any money. Why? Well, because nobody's found out about them yet. You know, they don't have the money to do the big advertising stuff. At $1,200 a month, maybe I could afford rent and one monthly advertisement in the local newspaper.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting I always think when these arguments come from rich people that, like the sort of things about, if people are given whatever benefits they are, therefore they won't work. And therefore, again, we've already discussed that the fact that this idea of value is based on your work is ridiculous. But, taking that argument, oh, well, these people won't work. Oh, well, they'll just sit there and be lazy. Oh, well, they'll do that. But they never make those arguments about their trust funds, do they?
Right.
Like rich people often have the greatest welfare to go back on because they've got it from their parents. They've got it from the environment they grew up in.
Yeah.
And it's essentially you're just evening that out a little bit. You're saying everyone gets that. Everyone gets to have that they can relax and they can, and so many opportunities which are not open to people here. I don't know what it's like there, but for example, here, journalism, the only way pretty much to get into journalism here is to take an unpaid internship.
I believe so here as well.
So it's only, we have like our journalists, I think they're 90%. I can't remember what the exact figure is. It's 94% white, I know that. But it's somewhere around 90% privately school educated. Now, I think about 7 to 10% are privately school educated in the UK, and 90% of journalists are private school educated. Because they're the ones with the parents that can give them the money to pay for their housing whilst they go for their internship for free.
Right.
Newspaper.
Yeah. How do the taxis work over there?
Taxis or taxes?
Taxis.
So you got different ways. So in what sense do you mean?
So here in the U.S., most states use medallion systems.
Right.
There's only a limited number of taxis that can exist at any one time.
Right. I mean,
that's probably like black cabs.
I know a little bit about taxis because my father was a taxi driver. Now he's a private chauffeur.
Okay.
It used to be that there was a limited number of taxis you could have in this general area. But so once the EU got involved, they removed that as a stipulation, and now there are a lot of taxis. Pretty much anyone can drive a taxi. You don't need to have the same sort of stringent
I'm glad to hear that.
licenses. Yeah, I mean, it's made it a problem because there's now so many that people struggle to get enough work because there's you see what I mean? So that's pretty much where we are with that.
So this might sound kind of bad. Actually, like any individual worker within a profession struggling to find work, I'm not so sure if that's a bad thing. I know, okay, but this is from somebody who intrinsically believes in the basic worth of a person. So basic income being sort of a ever-present thought in my mind, right? Like when I talk about society, I'm always talking about it as though either we're moving towards a basic income or as though we have it, because honestly, that's the only way I can rationalize continuing to operate in society. If we're never going to acknowledge human value, then I don't know if living in society is worth it.
Yeah.
But if we do get to the point where we're acknowledging everybody's basic value, then each individual not being able to find enough work isn't necessarily bad. It's technically how the market should be operating, right?
Yeah.
If you shouldn't be too strict on who can provide a service, because if all you need to be able to do is drive a car, then anybody with a car should be able to be a taxi driver. Uber kind of proved that there was a higher demand than we were satisfying for taxi drivers.
Yeah. I mean, Uber isn't really very popular in our region. I don't know anyone that uses it.
I don't think it's even available in Norfolk, though, is it?
I don't think
it's certainly in some of the bigger cities. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like in London and Manchester and sort of that kind of place. Yeah, it's popular there, but sort of not out where we live, which is we live very much in the sticks.
But then how it works is pretty dire. I mean, like how Uber works is pretty dire. They're underpaying their drivers, and they're of course undercutting the rest of the market, which is pissing off the rest of them because they can afford to charge lower prices because they're just underpaying their drivers, and then the other taxis don't get the work because of course Uber costs far less. And I mean, I think like if we had better wages generally here, people would pay more for it. Like they know, like so particularly young people, they're going to use Uber despite knowing its terrible business practices.
Yeah,
because they can't afford anything else.
Right.
And it's like anything else. And going to the cheap clothes shops, going to big chain, going to supermarkets rather than your local butcher or greengrocer or whatever. It's all because we don't have any money. We don't have the option to be ethical.
Well, and not to mention, like, honestly, you can do more good, more better. Jesus, grammar's bad. But you can do more good if you personally have more wealth. So you should be aiming for the lower cost products.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it partly, though, depends on the human cost of it as well, doesn't it?
Right.
If that makes sense.
For instance, if you're forcing cabbies to drive cars or something like that, then
looking at low cost. So let's take for example Wetherspoons. So Wetherspoons is a pub chain here run by a pretty vile individual, and there's recently been this spoon strike thing. So the workers who have been treated pretty badly there have gone on strike for better wages.
Okay, that's dope.
Now, a lot of people said, don't support Wetherspoons. And the spoon strikers have said, no, do support Wetherspoons. We'll be out of a job if you don't support Wetherspoons. But as well as coming into Wetherspoons and spending your money, also support the strike. So actually people working in these environments. Now I think it can be a reductive argument because, just because, like, for example, people working in sweatshops don't necessarily have access to any other kind of income.
Right.
So that doesn't mean we shouldn't be working to eradicate sweatshops, but we've got to look at making something better out of that. So I don't want to be reductive in that way. But at the same time, boycotting bad companies isn't necessarily the way forward. It's not necessarily what the workers want you to do.
Right. No, honestly, like myself, I would. Another reason I like the idea of a global government is it's much easier to pressure somebody who represents you. So I can't really pressure, for instance, any sort of government structure within the Congo to violently take over the coltan mines.
Yeah.
I can't cyberbully that person no matter how hard I try. But if I was determined enough and I got enough people on board, I could bully Hogan, my governor, into, I don't know, fucking pushing back into phase 1 of the lockdown.
Yeah.
So a globalized government, you can apply a lot more social pressure to.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. God, I spend all my time just talking about positions I hold on a fantasy world. Jesus, I hate this.
I mean, it could one day come to fruition. You never know.
We were talking about this slightly with gaming earlier, weren't we? About particularly with Fallout 4, because we've now got a new laptop and we want to build some kind of like socialist mods for that, so that people can get communist flag decorations and things like that.
Yeah.
And about kind of like using that as this, like, when we're building our communities there. Certainly I do a little bit, use it to build this kind of fantasy. It's all in my head because, of course, the way the game works, you have to have people employed at these shops and various different things. But in my head, like, there's a public purse that everyone puts into and everyone's giving to the good of the community and everything. And I've basically created this intersectional queer socialist utopia.
See, I went the other direction.
You were awful.
I invented this whole narrative around Starlight Drive, where there was sort of these capitalist people were really oppressing just some poor, lonely people, and how they sort of had this huge revolution. But yeah, that was quite an austere environment I built for them, like people living in just shitty tin cans.
I really enjoy Fallout 4. I've gotten hugely into the modding not making mods. I'm not talented in any way. But in downloading mods for my own games, like Sim Settlements is probably the best mod in the world. I don't know how much y'all have looked into mods and whatnot.
We've downloaded quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been playing it on PlayStation 4, so that's very limited for mods. But now that we've got a decent laptop, we can really get stuck in and experiment.
Hell yeah. Oh, man.
I think... Are you getting uncomfortable?
Yeah, my back is killing me.
We're gonna need, because I need to. I've got to have a radio interview this evening.
Yep, I was about to say we're getting on about the 2-hour mark here.
Probably.
And we don't want y'all doing too much editing.
No. But I mean, that's good because we can edit out. We can edit out that good, 5 minutes at the beginning where we're all silently looking up UBI.
Right, and you can edit around any of this to make any message you want. Probably.
Absolutely.
You can make me look like a monster.
Exactly what I'm intending to do. No, but thank you very much.
Yep. And I will try to get my recording sent out to you in some way or another.
Great.
That would be awesome. Brilliant. Well, that's been good fun. Yeah. And hopefully see you soon. And for anyone that's watching, take a look at Mr NoBuddies' Twitch stream.
Twitch stream and YouTube channel.
Twitch stream and YouTube channel. What do they need to look up?
It'll be twitch.tv/Mr NoBuddies. And then over on YouTube, you'll just have to look up Mr NoBuddies because the fucking actual link is nonsense.
Nice. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us.
All right.
We'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah. Take care.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hello everyone. Thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, or donating to us on Patreon.